Here are the Russiagate lies, the Twitter files. I've been waiting for these to see tell the tale of the fake tale of Russian bots, and what actually happened with Democrats actually really pushing Twitter to make a narrative. So it turns out Twitter executives were not happy with Democrats in this new round of Twitter files.
This is much less an indictment of Twitter and much more an indictment of not just the government, but one political party that was trying to frame a narrative around what they wanted in order to, if we really boil it down, go after Trump and Trump allies.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. And, they sort of brought out the hits of, we can always use Russia as the bad guy. Let's do that. We can make it seem as though Russia did this. Now, did they foresee maybe a major conflict coming with Russia 5 years down the road? Who knows? It's possible. And it continues to unpeel the onion, which we talk about all the time, is that the narratives around Russia in the mainstream media are largely false. That doesn't mean you have to support war, but you have to sort of see through this smokescreen of always blaming Russia for something. What's behind that? Well, we're going to see more behavior in that same direction of blaming Russia for something that really, has nefarious meanings. Now, I was one of these this is a lot around Devin Nunes. And at the time, you have to remember that Republicans were trying to raise the flag about certain surveillance around the Trump campaign leading up into the 2016 campaign. And Democrats basically made fun of them for it. They sort of mocked them like, oh, this is you doing. I mean, Rachel Maddow all but sort of called Devin Nunes like just a little Trumpy dweeb.
Right.
I watched this. I sort of fell for it at the time. And now that I see that this is based on air, I feel madder than ever.
So let's go through.
It's funny how everything that pointed towards Trump was elevated and put out, but then you have the Hunter Biden laptop that was suppressed. So it's just like, that is a clear manipulation. That everything was what do you call that? Where it's like just promoted and everybody, like it was allowed on every platform if you said anything about Trump or Russia, but if anything happened with Biden or the laptop,
right,
don't talk about it.
Yeah. So let's get into the details.
Yes, let's. All right, here we go. Here is Twitter thread number 14, Twitter files number 14, the Russiagate lies. One, the fake tale of Russian bots and the release the memo hashtag. So at a crucial moment in a years-long furor, Democrats denounced a report about flaws in the Trump-Russia investigation, saying it was boosted by Russian bots and trolls. Twitter officials were aghast. This is amazing. So Twitter officials are saying, there's no evidence of Russian influence. And yet you guys are pushing this. And internally they were saying, wait a second, we're feeding congressional trolls. Like Congress basically is asking for this stuff. Democrats are asking for this stuff. And we at Twitter are basically feeding this troll army that they've created, this garbage. So Twitter was basically acknowledging there's nothing here. They knew at the time there was nothing here. And we have all these Democrats on the Hill basically asking us to push this fake story.
Right. And we saw a little bit more of this communication just a few weeks ago with the previous round of Twitter files where Mark Warner, Congressman Mark Warner, was asking for this. And Twitter continued to push back, and they had a media fight. They had a fight in the media saying, we don't see it. We're looking. We want to. We can't find it.
So here's a letter. You want to explain this letter? This is Dear Senator Dianne Feinstein and Representative Schiff, thank you for your letter regarding hashtags and concerns over Russian disinformation efforts.
So the first three paragraphs, they just kind of say, we like working with you. We take this serious. We understand your concern. We've looked into it. But then in the bottom is where they give their results. We performed an analysis of available geographical data for tweets using this hashtag, and our initial inquiry based on available data has not identified any significant activity connected with Russia with respect to tweets posting original content to this hashtag.
Yeah. So we don't really find anything about this. We see we are feeding congressional trolls.
So this is internal conversation about it. The letter we just showed you was to Dianne Feinstein from legal counsel. And then more communication saying we're putting the cart before the horse here because we don't have any data. Clearly, you want this narrative. We get that, but we can't give it to you. And internally, they're calling them trolls. They're calling Congress people, elected senators and congressmen and congresswomen, trolling for information that they need to scream from their pulpits.
Twitter warned politicians and media they not only lacked evidence, but had evidence the accounts weren't Russian. So they had they knew that this wasn't true, but they had evidence that showed they were not Russian. That's even a step further, right? And they were roundly ignored by Democrats. Like, that's fine that you found no Russian involvement, and the fact that those accounts have nothing to do with Russia and you know where they came from, that's fine. We're ignoring you. Go ahead anyway and push this narrative.
All right, now we come to the memo because we're specifically talking about hashtag release the memo. So the memo is about Devin Nunes, Republican, and he submitted this memo to the House Intelligence Committee asking for information and an investigation about FISA warrants on Carter Page. Now, Carter Page was connected to the Trump organization, but he's not a politician and he's not an elected official. And so Devin Nunes then spells out how, these are the proper channels to get a FISA warrant, which is just a warrant that's tracking activity, communications without a person's knowledge. He says in order to get one from a private citizen, you need this to be signed off on by the director or deputy director of the FBI, and then another approval from either the attorney general, the deputy attorney general, or the Senate confirmed assistant attorney general of the National Security Division. And then he lays out that you need to renew this every 90 days in order to, because you can't put a blanket warrant on a FISA warrant on somebody like, we're just going to track Natali forever, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to show probable cause of wanting this every 90 days. And this happened. It says that it was signed off on by several different people. And he's just wondering, how can that happen? How does something like that happen? We'd like to see why you thought that this person was worth looking into. And so this is, it's important for public trust. If we know that people in the Trump campaign were tracked like this, we need to know why.
Right. And then it was all but confirmed, as they say here, the Nunes assertions would virtually all be verified in a report by the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz in December of 2019. So what Nunes is saying here is then confirmed but in 2019. And
they just made fun of him like, he was a never Trumper. I don't know if that's true or not, but this was the mainstream media narrative. And then when Trump was elected, now he's a brown noser and he's trying to curry favor with the new chief of, head of state. They just, like I said, I remember it so clearly, them sort of painting him as this like brown nosing kind of like, here, boss, I got a memo. You're going to like this.
Yeah. You see, and then they have a couple of media clips from that time. Andrea Mitchell, Nunes has turned House Intel Committee into a joke, says Andrea Mitchell. Right. Then here's another one. Opinion. The Nunes memo is out. It's a joke and a sham. And it's amazing. They're all using the same language. Like
we're going to get to Andrea Mitchell later in the Biden documents.
Yeah.
I got words for that lady.
Oh, yeah. Ex-RNC chairman rips Nunes memo for the joke it is. See, they keep using the same language. And that's very interesting that they keep using the same language, almost like they're handed this language, these talking points. And we saw that last week, of course, in another story. What story was it, David Phillips? Do you guys remember last week where like everyone was using the same language on a story? Democrats all came out. Oh, refuge. Bolsonaro. We can't allow him to have refuge in the United, and all like Ilhan Omar, AOC, they all were using the exact same sentences. Like who gives them these sentences as talking points? It's pretty crazy. So that was that. Okay, next slide here. On January 23rd, 2018, Senator Feinstein and Congressman Adam Schiff published an open letter saying the hashtag gained the immediate attention and assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. So, hey, thanks for this hashtag. It's now gotten immediate attention and assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. Then the Nunes memo distorts, they said, classified information, but they didn't call it incorrect. So you want to explain this? So
yes. So this is Feinstein and Schiff saying, even though this Devin Nunes memo, it's distorting classified information. They're saying, but it's not really true that, the Trump campaign was tracked in this way. They didn't say that as much, but they're trying to really hard push away from the actual content of the memo.
Well, and also that letter, you can see that it's addressed to both Dorsey and Zuckerberg. So this stuff is happening on, we know that if it's happening on Twitter, it's happening on Facebook, it's happening on YouTube, it's happening on TikTok, all of the social networks.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that. Which letter was?
Yeah, it was good catch. That was on, if you look at the top of, was it this one?
I missed it.
It was
the Dianne Feinstein one.
Yeah, right
Mr.
here.
Dorsey
It's
and Mr. Zuckerberg.
See, it's very low quality, but you can see
that one's really hard to read.
Dear Mr. Dorsey and Mr. Zuckerberg.
Good catch, David.
You get a star sticker.
Yay.
And then
I was just going to say that.
Matt Taibbi writes for number 10, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal followed suit, publishing a letter saying, we find it reprehensible that Russian agents have so eagerly manipulated innocent Americans, sending that to Twitter. Like, can you imagine if you're Jack Dorsey and like you're getting all of this stuff from like the FBI comes to, then you get all of these members of Congress who are sending these letters. We're really upset because we have this intelligence that's saying Russian, and you're saying internally, and you're having your own engineers go through these accounts. You're like, no, these are not Russian. And by the way, we found out, like, not only not Russian, we know where these accounts are from. They have nothing to do with Russia. We're telling you that, but you don't care.
Right.
You're just going to continue to force our hand.
And later on, they circle back around and say, like, hey, I'd like some information on this about the assertion I published yesterday. It's kind of crazy that
in 24 hours, we expected you guys to have a full hands-on report.
No, what they're saying, like Dianne Feinstein, I believe, what we're going to get to, she publishes something to the American public. And then the next day asks for Twitter to back it up on what she already published. Like, you already went with that, girl. Like, you had your chance. We're telling you we don't have it.
So now we get into the meat of this. This is the FBI piece of this and this Hamilton 68 dashboard. This thing is really fascinating. So Feinstein, Schiff, Blumenthal, and media members all pointed to the same source, this mysterious Hamilton 68 dashboard, created by former FBI counterintelligence official Clint Watts, under the auspices of the Alliance for Securing Democracy. So they all kept talking about this. According to Hamilton 68, released the memo. Hamilton 68, released the memo. Hamilton 68 just launched. Even though it just launched last summer, they really feel like that it's comfortable making the claim based on additional research and analysis. The deep state has been a constant topic on the dashboard for months, but nothing like the past few weeks as the release the memo hashtag peaked. It went from 5% of the content back in September to where it's consistently around 15%. So the dashboard, here it is, which featured a crude picture of Putin deviously blowing evil red Twitter birds into the atmosphere, was vague in how it reached its conclusions.
Yes, so Twitter later discussed this. It says inside Twitter, executives panned this and it told each other that they should be skeptical of this for a couple of reasons. They say here it plays to ASD. What do you think that is? That escapes me.
Alliance for Securing Democracy.
Oh, okay.
That was the
and they're saying and then Yoel Roth, our favorite chief twit, comes in and says we don't know anything about how this Hamilton 68. What is their methodology? They don't give us a list of usernames that we can even look into. So we don't see what they're seeing, and we would love to, sort of reproduce this study if they could just tell us how they did it and who are the users that are the offenders here.
Two key complaints. Hamilton 68 seemed to be everyone's only source, and no one was checking with Twitter. Like, oh, the FBI made up this like random BS dashboard, and then that's what we're supposed to go with? But then when you check with Twitter, they're like, no, that doesn't happen. These aren't real accounts. Sorry, you're wrong about that. But no one seemed to check with them about this.
At some point, Twitter just can't handle it anymore. If you go to number 16, we're 2 ahead of that.
Okay.
That the vice president of communications or policy vice president is saying, maybe we should push back on this because this is just, we need to correct the record where all of this out here is just wrong.
So Twitter is basically pushing back. I mean, good for them on this one, saying, well, this is just wrong, but good for them. But then of course, what ended up happening, like they had this internal dialogue back, but they didn't come forward with this. They didn't go public with this. And in the end, of course, it was suppressed. And this
that's another thing that's missing is why didn't they? Why did this die?
Right. Matt Taibbi writes, number 17, Yoel Roth couldn't find any Russian connection to the release of the memo at all.
In fact, go to number 18. It said, we were not able to find this connected to Russian bots. If you read the highlighted part, can you open the graphic, please? It says, we investigated and found that engagement on release the memo hashtag was overwhelmingly organic and driven by strong, very important tweeters, very important people, basically, like real people engagement, including WikiLeaks, Donald Trump Jr., Representative Steve King, and others. None of those things are Russian. Those are just people who have, opinions that are more right wing.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call WikiLeaks right wing, but
or journalists, right, or members of Congress. So you have Representative Steve King,
right?
Okay, so he's not allowed to have an opinion about. All right. What number are we on now?
19. This is what we were talking about earlier, that a staffer for Dianne Feinstein reached out again and said, it'd be helpful to know how Hamilton 68 goes by the process by which they decide an account is Russian. She asked for this, but only after Feinstein had already published her letter about Russian influence. So you've already, set this on fire. So you're circling back around for truth about something you've already said, which means you're publishing things you don't know at all are true.
When Twitter
not even don't know that are true, was told by Twitter that it wasn't, like they couldn't find anything. So she knew already the findings and said it anyway.
Yeah.
When Twitter spoke to Blumenthal staffer, they tried to wave him off because we don't believe these are bots. Added another, it might be worth nudging Blumenthal's staffer that it could be in his boss's best interest to not go out there because it could come back to make him look silly.
But that's the thing. This one really haunts me because it didn't until now.
Yeah.
They got away with it. They got their influence. They were able to flip elections and flip balance of power. They absolutely did not look silly until this moment.
Nick Pickles. Love this name, Nick Pickles, by the way.
I would not like to have that name.
Nick Pickles. Just be glad his name's not Richard Pickles. So one Twitter exec even tried to negotiate, implying an undisclosed future PR concession if Richard Blumenthal would lay off on this. It seems like there are other wins we could offer him. Like they're trying to horse trade. Like we'll basically, we'll give you some good stuff if you just lay off this one because it's not true. Like we could drum up some other stuff. Yeah. Let's say it's China. We'll say it's other. Yeah. Or we'll just create some other shit that you can take.
Yeah. I mean, we'll run an internal survey about how people don't like Trump. Can you take that? Take that instead.
But it didn't work because number 23, Blumenthal published his letter anyway. Despite the fact that he knew better. Execs eventually grew frustrated over what they saw as circular process, presented with claims of Russian activity. Even when denied, they led to more claims. They expressed this explicitly to Blumenthal's camp, saying Twitter spent a lot of resources on the request and the reward from Blumenthal shouldn't be round after round of requests. We can't do a user notice each time this happens. They're like, hey, we've got other stuff to go on here, other stuff to do. We can't handle all this. Eventually, Twitter staff realized Blumenthal isn't looking for real nuanced solutions, but just wants to get credit for pushing us further.
That's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, here's the internal. Sorry, the scale's wrong. Blumenthal isn't always looking for real and nuanced solutions. He just wants to get credit and push us further, Carlos writes.
And then another senior executive, number 27, says this is like feeding congressional trolls. And he compares it to the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And Matt Taibbi talks about this is like a if you give an inch, they take a mile type story where you give the mouse the cookie and then it wants a glass of milk and then a blanket and then another glass of milk and then another cookie. And it comes full circle where like it's a child that it's like a hostage situation when you put your daughter to bed. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. It's total hostage situation. Like, no, now I want a drink of water. No,
you didn't give me a hug.
No, I need another hug.
I forgot about
which I know it's sweet. Because someday I'm going to be looking back and be like, oh, I wish I could have had that extra hug again. So I don't want to be an ass. Someone in our chat. So let me know what you think about this as we go through this letter here in our chat right now on Rumble. Someone says they should. Jaybird Thoughts on Rumble says they should have blown the whistle. Like, how many of you, I know it's easy to say that, but how many of you believe that these Twitter employees should have come forward and, well, who would they have gone to? I mean, because the media is totally they could have gone to maybe some conservative media. They could have.
And said, look, we continue to show these congressional leaders that their assertions are false or not founded. And they're publishing these things anyway.
Yeah. But that's like, it's almost like the whole thing where you got to be quiet against your own team. Because like they're on that team. Right. You know, they want to help them, but like they can't, but they also can't be like, well, you know what, our team members are being out of line. We need to tell the coach. Like, they're not going to do that because that could have caused a lot more damage to their team.
Well, one thought that I have about where else would they have blown the whistle is their own platform. They failed to do that then, but they're doing it now.
Yeah.
But what would we have done if we had seen that 5 years ago? We would be in a much different place. We would presumably be much less of a divided nation.
Yeah, and we might not have the president of the United States. The bottom line, we might not have the president of the United States that we have right now if we were allowed to see the truth. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Hunter Biden laptop story wasn't suppressed after the New York Post published the story, after Miranda Devine's story hit the press, and it was kept from everyone, this pushing of a fake Russia narrative, pushing this. I mean, arguably, this goes way to the top, and it influenced the national election. We might have a totally different president of the United States right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, didn't the Russia stuff also influence an impeachment?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting, of course, is like what led to that impeachment arguably is perhaps even more fiery under what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop, and there's no investigation. There's no.
Exactly.
There is now in the House
on the Hunter side. Yeah, but as far as it relates to the president of the United States, it never got to that level. So just the phone call led to an impeachment. What, right. Anyway, we can go down that rabbit hole. But Matt Taibbi wraps it up here saying the metaphor for the endless Russia request was so perfect, one executive wrote, I'm legit embarrassed that I didn't think of that first. So, just when you think that Twitter is like maybe trying to do the right thing, no, they're literally like, wow, that's a great idea.
I read it differently. I think it's the metaphor for the mouse and the cookie is they're saying, oh, that's so good. Like, yes, this is exactly what we're experiencing. I wish I had thought of that mouse and the cookie. I think that's what they're saying. I think that Twitter is absolutely dumbfounded here that elected leaders will not stop coming after them to validate their own assertions for political gain. They just can't believe it. It is what it seems to me.
Well, it has to be so maddening. And I was just sitting here thinking, it'd be like if you were expected to react like if somebody was telling you they were assaulted by the physically assaulted by the literal Easter bunny, and you were being forced to like try to pretend like you believe it. And you're just sitting there going, "What? I know. I don't buy this. This isn't happening." And but in this case, though, they had proof that it wasn't Russia doing it, and then still everybody's like, "No, you've got to say it. You've got to say it." I mean, it's just maddening. Yes. Absolutely maddening.
Yeah.
Someone in our chat says they could have come to Redacted. Yeah, you could have come to our show with this information, and we would have blown the whistle.
We didn't exist back then.
We existed as humans, but our show in its form didn't. But now we do. So if anyone wants to come forward, and anyone from Facebook, by the way, my email address, Clayton at Redacted.inc.
Ooh, wouldn't that be so good if we got the Facebook files?
Yes, Facebook. Anybody who works at Facebook that would like to share information with us, please let me know. We would love to feature it here on Redacted. again, Clayton at redacted.inc. That's my email. So send it to me, and we'd be happy to tell your story here. And anybody else, anybody who, I don't know, works at another big video platform as well that is
even
often
anonymously.
censoring. Even anonymously, totally anonymously. Love to see that. Share that with us. Let us know. So at the bottom line of all of this is that Natali says, despite universal internal conviction, there were no Russians in the Russian story. Twitter went on to follow a slavish pattern of not challenging the Russia claims on the record. And that kind of is where we are. So now outside counsel from DC connected firms advised Twitter to use language like, with respect to particular hashtags, we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform, teaching them how to actually talk about it. As a result, reporters from the AP to Politico to NBC to Rolling Stone continue to hammer the Russian bot story, despite a total lack of evidence. So Russians weren't just blamed for the release of the memo, but Schumer shut down Parkland shooting, even gun control now to widen the divide, according to the New York Times.
Well, and that's like, we have an interview of a CIA agent on our countdown timer that's talking about how certain things that they put out at certain times of war or whatever were 100% fake propaganda. And they knew that's exactly what this was because they could not find any evidence of it anywhere. They asked, they tried, they pushed to try to find any glimpse of evidence. And even major offices, branches of the government came out and said, the intelligence agency said they had found it. And it was all 100% lies and propaganda.
Yeah. And then later, and what's worse is number 35. All the mainstream media outlets that are willing to gobble it right up. They just love it. NBC, Politico, AP, Times, Business Insider, all of them just picked it right up. Russian bot, yes. Russian bot for anything we don't like. That's the new scapegoat. And Matt Taibbi says that the staffs of Feinstein, Schiff, and Blumenthal all declined to comment
on this story,
on this release of documents and their participation in this Russian bot narrative. Who did comment? He says Devin Nunes. He said Schiff and the Democrats falsely claimed Russia was behind the release the memo hashtag all my investigative work by spreading the Russia collusion hoax. They instigated one of the greatest outbreaks of mass delusion in U.S. history.
Oh. Then he says this release the memo episode is just one of many of the Twitter files. The Russiagate scandal was built on the craven dishonesty of politicians and reporters who for years ignored the absence of data to fictional scare headlines. So we'll have more on that. So again, we're still waiting on, and I think they're sort of really trying to vet right now, it seems, the Fauci files. Like, we were told that those would be coming out last week. We still don't have the Fauci files.
Yeah.
So we're still waiting on what
we
that's
want
going
them.
Yeah. So why? What's taken so long on the Fauci files? That's a darn good question. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.